Hi, I'm Karan Thapar. Over the last few years, I hope you've been watching my program, The Interview on the Wire. During that period, I've interviewed doctors, politicians, businessmen, scientists, authors, and even the occasional Nobel laureate. For me, it's been exciting. I hope it's been enjoyable for you. But these, as you know, are tough times, and if this program is going to remain bold, independent, and sometimes even defiant, then I think we need your support. At the end of the day, it's a truism, but editorial independence is best defended by the viewers. So if you would like this program to remain the way it is, forthright, outspoken, and interesting, then would you consider supporting us? All you have to do is to click on the description at the bottom. But more than anything else, I hope you will continue to watch the interview. Your viewership means an awful lot to me. Hello and welcome to a special interview for The Wire. The Justice Shekhar Yadav and Justice Yashwant Verma cases have led to a growing chorus of opinion that the present in-house mechanism for judicial accountability is weak and inadequate. Where is it failing? What sort of mechanism do we need to replace it? Whose responsibility is it to create it? And do we need to change the way judges are chosen? Those are the key issues I should raise today with one of our most highly regarded lawyers, former Law Minister and President of the Supreme Court Bar Association, Kapil Sibal. Mr. Sibal, reading between the lines of your recent discussion with the Indian Express, I get the feeling you believe the judiciary does not have an effective and meaningful in-house mechanism for accountability. You said to the paper, the judiciary has not responded to these issues institutionally, and that's very, very disturbing. Am I right in my belief?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Where is the present mechanism failing, or is it simply non-existent? Which of the two?
According to me, it's only on paper, because see, the reaction to a given situation is ad hoc, limited to that situation. You know, if you see in the past, whether it was the allegations against Justice Gogoi or Shekhar Yadav, or allegations against other judges, the institutional mechanism has been completely non-transparent. In this particular case, of course, the Chief Justice of India and the Collegium, I'm sure, decided to release the tape, thinking that that's a transparent way of doing things as we move forward. But there is no institutional mechanism for that. In other words, the institution should have a set of procedures as to how to proceed if any form of wrongdoing, alleged misbehavior comes to their notice. And what they normally do when these things come to their notice is to transfer the judge. That's no mechanism at all, instead of investigating. The other thing that you actually, there are three kinds of according to me, alleged misbehaviors that have to be investigated. One, financial. Two, where the judge openly supports a particular ideology. And three, where there is some kind of, one is supporting an ideology, then it's financial, and the third is sexual. And we've had these kind of instances, alleged sexual misbehavior. Now, in the other cases, there has been no transparency at all. So obviously, therefore, either the institutional mechanism is not working or there is no real institutional mechanism.
So if I understand correctly, you have 3 or 4 major problems with the mechanism that exists at the moment in-house for judicial accountability. First of all, you say it's written on paper, but it is not implemented. Secondly, it's not transparent. Thirdly, it applies in different cases in different ways. And there isn't a statutory mechanism that should automatically roll out. All of those are concerns that you have, am I right?
No, that's not, you can't have a statutory mechanism because statute means parliament coming into the picture. Yeah, it's an in-house procedure. So the mechanism must be in-house. It must be institutional. There must be a SOP, standard operating procedures, as to how to deal with any given situation. And if there are allegations which they prima facie believe in, instead of investigating these matters in-house, they transfer the judge. So this is no way to dealing with issues of probity.
Let's take a couple of examples to illustrate the points you're making. Let's start with the Justice Shekhar example. As far as the press is concerned, as far as public opinion is concerned, he's clearly guilty of communal statements. But when, according to news reports, the in-house mechanism asked him to apologize, he flatly refused. And there the matter has been stalled and stymied for weeks. In your eyes, who's to blame? Is it the fact that the in-house mechanism is weak that is to blame? Or is it his defiance that is to blame? Or is it both?
Well, I don't know whether he defied or not, because that also is not in the public domain. That's your assumption that he defied and he said that, he wouldn't. Allegedly, some say he was asked to apologize, but I don't know that. This is all in the, in newspaper reports. But be that as it may, the fault lies at both ends. One, if there were a standard operating procedure, there would be a beginning and an end, right? Now, and the second problem is that if the judges realized that he had done something wrong, they kept quiet about it. So the institutional mechanism itself has to blame if there is one such mechanism in place.
So there's blame at multiple levels.
That's correct.
Now let's take another example. Often the response of the in-house mechanism, and you pointed this out yourself in an earlier answer, is to transfer the erring judge. The classic example is Justice Deena Karan, who was transferred from Karnataka to Sikkim, and the Sikkim Bar Council was extremely upset. This is also the first response in the case of Justice Yashwant Verma. But are transfers an appropriate way of punishing a judge? And secondly, if transfer becomes the mechanism rather than inquiry, isn't it effectively ducking the issue?
Absolutely, I entirely agree with you. Transfer is not the solution at all, because if there are allegations against a judge in one high court and you transfer him to another high court, the other high court says, why are you transferring him here? Because the allegations, need to be investigated. And this has happened in the case of another judge who's been transferred to Calcutta just very recently. The Calcutta bar is up in arms.
Justice Sharma.
It doesn't solve the problem. You're just not wanting to deal with the problem. If you don't want to deal with the problem, either the fault lies at your end, or there is no real institutional mechanism to deal with it.
I want very much to talk to you about how we should deal with the problem. But before I come to that issue, let me identify for the audience the three areas where you believe there is a need for an institutional mechanism of accountability. You mentioned these yourself a moment ago. You said it's financial corruption, sexual misconduct, and the open alignment with the political ideology. Would I be right in saying that practically all cases of judicial misconduct fall into one of these three categories?
Absolutely, absolutely. And remember, the Constitution in Article 124 uses the term proved misbehavior. Now, misbehavior could be of any sort. I mean, I've given you three examples because these are recent examples, but you could have all kinds of misbehavior. And some of these will probably come up later, which are, more than the three categories that I have set out for you. So if it's misbehavior, therefore there have to be standards of behavior. Now, there are standards of behavior that have been set out by the Supreme Court itself, but they don't act on it. Now, either you have strict standards of behavior, and if somebody violates those standards of behavior, then there should be a process of mechanism. If the violation is not so serious, then there should be, a warning. If the violation is more serious, there should be some other action should be taken, right? Maybe stop work for 2 weeks, 3 weeks. If the violation is far more serious, then of course you have to take further action. And if violation, tends to be criminal in nature, then obviously the sanction of the Chief Justice of India for lodging an FIR.
Tell me something. If there are laid down standards or agreed standards set by the judiciary itself, standards of behavior, and then when those are breached, no action is taken, doesn't that suggest to the lay public that this is hypocrisy on the part of the judiciary?
I don't want to use those harsh words. Remember, you see, this is now, I'm part of this institution in a way, and perhaps this is the only institution that really stands up to the government. And we have some of the finest judges across the country. See, what happens is that these individual cases tend to, paint the judiciary or brush the judiciary as if everybody is corrupt or everybody has a black mark against his name. That's not true. You have fabulous judges in this court who stand up. Now, every time you take action against a particular judge, the image of the judiciary goes down in the eyes of the public. So the institution has to be very careful in matters of this nature. And because it needs to protect the institutional integrity, at the same time, it needs to tell the public that, look, where there is wrongdoing, we're not going to sort of mince our words and we're going to take action.
But what happens in practice is to protect the wider, greater image of the judiciary as a whole. The few rotten apples that are found are not effectively acted against.
That's correct. That's entirely correct.
So what you're saying is you need a better balance where the image of the judiciary is protected and not impaired, but the rotten apples are identified and acted against, or if need be, removed.
I'll give you a small example. If some judge who is known to be, quote unquote, allegedly corrupt, let's assume, and serious action is taken. In other words, the Chief Justice lodges an FIR and the judge is actually sent into custody. That sends a message to the entire institution that you better be careful.
Quite right.
Right. So therefore, that kind of action in a case where you believe, you firmly believe, and you have hard evidence to know that, or you quietly investigate that matter through an investigating agency, right? And you come to a conclusion. If you really take that strong action, there will be ripples across the institution, which will prevent people from, it be kind of deterrent for those who might want to do something wrong.
Absolutely. As Admiral Byng famously said during the Napoleonic Wars, it's a case of pour encourager les autres, to encourage others not to do the same thing ever again.
Correct. That's what I think should be done.
Let's then talk about the sort of mechanism we need if we are going to have close to an effective, meaningful in-house accountability mechanism. To begin with, should it be devised by the judiciary on its own or in consultation with the bar? You've told the Express, and I'm quoting, this should be decided in consultation with the bar. We know as much about judges that they know themselves. In other words, this has to be cooperative between the judiciary and the bar, doing it together.
Let me honestly tell you, Karan, we know about our judges and the judges know about us, right? It's no open secret. They know in the bar who is doing what, and we know in the bench who is doing what. So it's not that we have specific knowledge, but there is enough indications that some judges are not conducting themselves consistently with the highest standards of the judiciary. So a collaborative procedure set out, not just a collaborative mechanism, which involves both the bar as well as the bench, through which information can be shared between the judiciary and the bar, so that we know exactly what we have to do. This is very, very important, because if the bench does not collaborate with the bar, the bench may not know what's happening in the bar, in certain specific instances. And so we can provide that information, and then that mechanism can move forward. Now, but they would not like that. They would not like that. I mean, my sense is they may not like that.
They may not like that, but there's a logic behind what you're saying, which they need to accept.
I think so. I think so.
Now, naming you personally, 2 years ago, you said, "Let us As the present president of the Supreme Court Bar Association, Dushyant Dave, one of your predecessors, told me last week that you should personally take an initiative and meet the Chief Justice and involve the bar in devising a more suitable mechanism for accountability. Are you personally willing to take that step?
Think so. Why not? Why not? I have no hesitation in doing that. But I honestly feel that I may not be encouraged in that from the other side. That's what I suspect.
In other words, you would be willing, but you don't think the door will be open.
I think it'll be, yeah. I really don't think it'll be wide open.
But would you be willing to knock and see?
Why not? Why not? Why not?
Okay. Secondly, I know that the mechanism for accountability, the in-house mechanism, can't be statutory because that would mean passage through legislation in Parliament. But does it need to be formal? Secondly, does it need to be well known? And thirdly, does it need to have several steps so that it's properly structured?
It's formal, it's well known, it's already structured, and standards of accountability are already in place.
So it needs to be all of that.
Back in 1991, adopted by the court.
It just needs to be adhered to and implemented.
Why, it needs to be, somewhat looked at once again to make it, a stronger mechanism, a more effective mechanism.
With that point in mind, let me ask you this. Once the mechanism has determined that there is a case to inquire into, should that inquiry only involve judges, or should it also involve bodies like the Supreme Court and High Court Bar Associations, perhaps even judicial experts from academia? This is after the judges have determined, or the mechanism has determined, that there is a case to inquire into. Who should do that inquiry?
I think that you shouldn't involve the bar in it. I don't think we should involve academicians in it. I think the judges themselves, with the help of, as I said, if you have a mechanism through which the bar is also represented, Supreme Court bar or the High Court bar, as the case may be, then that mechanism should be sufficient to take it forward.
At what point should the police be involved and an FIR be registered?
See, there's a problem there, Karan. Now, in Veeraswamy's case, the Supreme Court decided that no FIR can be lodged against any judge till the Chief Justice of India sanctions prosecution. Now, sanctions prosecution means that you have enough evidence requiring a full investigation at the hands of the police. And that would involve custodial interrogation, that would naturally involve arrest. Now, that's a very, very serious issue. In a lot of these cases, you may not need that, right? Now, there are two avenues through which this process works. One is if a judge commits a murder, let's assume, right? Now, that's a pure criminal offense. And straight away, the police should be allowed to investigate because no sanction should be required in a matter of that nature. But if it's a case of under the Prevention of Corruption Act, then the act itself says that you need a sanction before prosecution. That's why the Supreme Court in Veeraswamy's case said sanction. So if it's a case of corruption, the Chief Justice has to be absolutely sure. And then when sanction is given, then the FIR is lodged. But in an ordinary criminal case, I don't think you need it because that's not part of the court's, that's not part of the court's official duty.
So you're saying,
if you commit a criminal act.
So you're saying, depending upon the nature of the case, criminal sanction will be granted depending upon the case. FIRs will be lodged if it's a murder case, but if it's a financial corruption case, the inquiry is essential first, and then it goes to the Chief Justice to decide what to do.
That's correct.
If found guilty, what sort of punishment should be handed out in cases where impeachment is not warranted? Should there be grades of punishment?
That's what I said to you originally, because there may be a minor infraction of the code of conduct, right? In which case, there should be a minor punishment. because you can't treat every infraction in the same fashion. Just like in any criminal case, for every wrongdoing, criminal wrongdoing, violation of the law of the penal code or the BNS, there has to be a sentencing procedure, which will depend on the facts of each case.
The problem, Kapil Sibal, is that when a punishment is handed out, whether it is a minor punishment or a serious punishment, it has to be publicly known. Whether the judge is admonished or whether he's punished in some other way, the public would need to find out. And won't that end up damaging his or her credibility and standing, and perhaps even impair the ability to function effectively thereafter?
I don't think so. I don't think so, unless it's a very serious misdemeanor. And if, for example, I can give examples, I don't want to make them public like this, but there are several examples where the code of conduct is not followed and the judges needs to be just admonished. Maybe not even put in the public domain. Public domain when you want to take some really serious action.
An admonishment can be handed out privately without it being made public. But if a judge is to be told not to work for 2 or 3 weeks, that the world find out about.
That's a problem. That's a problem. Once he's told not to work, then it's a real problem. Then the credibility of the judge, is not something that lawyers will accept or even litigants will accept.
So this level of punishment has to be very carefully considered before it's meted out.
Correct. Because it's not an ordinary case of an individual, no? Doing a criminal act or a misdemeanor. It's ultimately the institution itself is damaged. So you have to be very careful. With this, as I said, this is the only institution, and we have some of the finest judges in the world manning it. So you have to be very careful.
Let me at this point come to the Justice Yashwant Verma case. How effectively and responsibly has it been handled by the in-house mechanism? Dushyant Dave, who I said is your predecessor as president of the Bar Association, believes that Justice Verma should have been arrested and he should have been subjected to custodial interrogation on the grounds that that is precisely what would have happened in the case of ordinary citizens. That the in-house mechanism should have decided within 24 hours that there is a case to answer or not. And if the answer is yes, there is a case, there should have been arrest and there should have been custodial interrogation thereafter.
Well, if the in-house procedure had come to that conclusion, it would have happened. Obviously, the in-house procedure didn't come to that conclusion.
You get the feeling he's been protected by the in-house procedure?
No, how? I don't know the facts. I don't think even Dushyant knows the facts.
But that is clearly Dushyant Dave's impression.
No, it may be his impression, but how can his impression be converted into custodial interrogation?
So as things stand at the moment, you're satisfied with the way the in-house mechanism is treated?
I am nobody to say whether I'm satisfied or not because I don't know the facts. And I'm not going to opine on the facts. I'm not going to talk about the merits of the case because I don't know the merits of the case.
Well, some of the facts, if not a fair amount of the facts, have been revealed deliberately in public by the Chief Justice of India.
That's not the point. That's why the in-house inquiry. That is why the in-house inquiry.
So you don't think what's been revealed so far by the Chief Justice of India merits arrest or custodial interrogation?
Not for me to say, it's for the Chief Justice and the Collegium to decide. I am nobody to decide. I don't think people outside, whether it's the bar or it's citizens or the media, should decide what should happen, what should not happen.
Then we have a very intriguing problem. If your position is that it is for the Chief Justice to decide whether an FIR or custodial interrogation is necessary, and the Chief Justice is the only one with the facts and he won't reveal the facts in full to the public.
The Collegium, it's not the Chief Justice alone.
Then we have to accept and trust that he's doing the right thing. You're saying take it on faith.
It's the Collegium. It's not just the Chief Justice here. There are 5 senior-most judges of the Supreme Court who must have applied their minds and taken it forward. And so therefore you must trust them.
But if the whole thing is to be based upon trusting them, is it an adequate way of proceeding?
Because you are now assuming, Karan, now you're assuming.
Look at the Justice Shekhar Yadav case. We've trusted to do the right thing, and no punishment has been given to him whatsoever. He continues to function in the Allahabad High Court.
Which is why I openly criticize that. That's why I openly criticize it in Shekhar Yadav's case. That's why I'm critical of it. I'm also openly criticize what happened in the Justice Gogoi's case.
Absolutely.
But in this case, when there is an in-house procedure that has started, and there is an inquiry going on, you must trust that mechanism and, keep your opinion, till some action is taken or a decision is taken that no action need be taken. We don't know the facts.
So what you're saying is once an in-house mechanism has started an in-house inquiry, trust the mechanism to function properly. Don't have doubts or skepticism of it.
I tell you, the two cases that you mentioned, the scenario is entirely different. In the case of Shekhar Yadav, what he said was already in the public domain. There was nothing to be proved there. It happened in the Bar Association. It happened at the instance of the VHP, which called the meeting, and we have what he said is on record. Nothing to be inquired into. In the case of Justice Gogoi, there was an allegation by a person. There was an allegation by a person.
And
that allegation
he
was
himself sat on his own case.
correct. So therefore, there was very little to be inquired into.
But then both of those failures are egregious failures where actually grounds for trusting the collegium diminish hugely.
No, but that's precisely why I'm saying that this Chief Justice has taken charge and said, I'm going to hold an in-house inquiry. He's not protecting anybody.
Well, hang on a second. This Chief Justice may have acted in your eyes admirably in the Verma case, but in the Yadav case, the same Chief Justice was involved and didn't acquit himself with flying colors.
So we have therefore criticized that process openly.
And yet you still are prepared to trust.
Yes, obviously. You have to. You have to trust. And where there is some, inappropriate decision, we will criticize it, as we have done.
Okay.
And maybe because of those criticism, some action is being taken.
It's all dependent on trust, and that is the problem, isn't it? If you're willing to trust that the collegium is doing the right thing, you would have faith in them. But if you're doubtful and skeptical, you won't. It's all
on trust. There's a difference, Karan. In those cases, there was nothing to be proved.
And still the collegium didn't act properly.
Therefore, we publicly criticize it. Here is something to be proved here, that we don't know the facts. Okay. There's a very qualitative difference between those instances and this.
Yes, except that where there's nothing to be proved, and if the collegium in those cases actually failed to act adequately, that really does cast a severe cloud over the way the collegium
That's why the nation is debating it, and that's why I and you are in a conversation on this issue.
Absolutely. Then connected to this issue of how judges are made accountable is the matter of how they are chosen. Do you believe the collegium system is functioning effectively? Or does it need substantial changes? Or do we need, in some new shape and form, a National Judicial Appointments Commission? Which of the three?
Well, both have worked less than satisfactorily. That's a very mild expression. In fact, they have let us down. The collegium system has, in a way, let us down, allowing for appointments of judges who should not be on the bench. And the NGAC will give more power to a government which openly is destructive of all democratic institutions in this country. I would be extremely sad if an institution like the NGAC would be put in place, and the appointments of judges were to be in the hands of the government. It would be a disaster.
Even a revised and different NJAC would make you extremely sad.
Yes.
In which case, are you saying the collegium system such as it is must continue, or do we need substantial changes in the collegium system?
Not just a complete overhaul of the collegium system, not just substantial changes, a complete overhaul.
Can you indicate what that overhaul would amount to?
Well, I'll indicate that. For example, instead of just the 5 judges in the collegium, there should be a much broad-based committee in which lawyers of great integrity, which are known to the court as well as the bar, are represented, where citizens of great integrity, which are also known to all of us, are represented, where academicians are represented, where journalists of great integrity are represented, and the public. and let's say it's an 11-member committee. Let's assume, okay, that's a pretty large committee. Now, they chalk out a program depending on when vacancies are going to occur in high courts and Supreme Court, right, over the years. Say the next 10 years, when are the vacancies going to occur? Then what they decide to do is, okay, find out in which high court, who are the persons who are fit enough, according to the committee, to be considered for appointment as judges. Supposing in that high court there are 5 vacancies. Okay, then you start looking at about 10 advocates, right? And you might start making discrete inquiries privately from people in that court, from judges in that court, from citizens, who are concerned with the institution, and find out who the 10 best might be. And that should be considered by the committee. And 10 names should be suggested to the government. And in this committee, government also must be represented. Government has a huge stake in the appointment of judges. So apart from all the members that I have mentioned, you must have appointees of the government also, members of the government also. So when these names are sent to the government, 10 names are sent, and we tell them that you choose 5 of these 10. So they can't go outside the recommendations of the committee. The committee has done its job with great circumspection, and the committee has chosen the best people. That's the best system we can have. And then the discretion is appoint 5 out of 10, but you can't go outside this.
Would you be prepared to not just publicly canvass the suggestion you're making? In a sense, you've already done that. You're speaking to me and going public. But would you be prepared to formally, as President of the Supreme Court Bar Association, take this up with the Chief Justice?
Yes, I would be. I would be. Very
Do you
happy
have any
to.
sense of what his response will be?
I don't know. I'm sure that the present Chief Justice is one of the finest we have had, and I'm sure that he will react favorably, and at least he'll say, I'll consider it, or we'll put it to the Collegium and let's consider it.
The present Chief Justice has only till the 11th of May before he retires. You have to act very quickly.
The next Chief Justice is also a phenomenal, a great judge, I think.
But just to cap, you are prepared to knock on the door in this instance to advise or to suggest a better way of improving and making the Collegium more effective, just as you were also willing to knock on the door to help create an in-house mechanism that's more effective. In both cases, you're prepared to knock on the door.
Yeah, absolutely. Without any doubt, I'm prepared to do that. Because, the integrity of the institution is at stake. And if this institution, its reputation is besmirched in the eyes of the public, there's nothing left. There are 2 institutions. One has already let us down. One is the institution, the journalism in this country, mainstream journalism. They've already let us down, and we can't really rely upon them anymore because they have completely succumbed to the government. The only other institution left is the judiciary, and that's also in pretty bad shape as we see it.
All right, Kapil Sibal, that is a very clear commitment that you're making. Not only have you canvassed a very thoughtful and forthright suggestion of how the Collegium can be improved, strengthened, and made more meaningful, but you are prepared both in the case of getting a better Collegium, but also in the case of getting a better in-house mechanism of accountability to knock on the door of the Chief Justice to share your advice directly with him and through him with the rest of the Collegium.
Thank you. Nice
Thank you very much indeed. Take care. Stay safe.
Hi, I'm Karan Thapar. Over the last few years, I hope you've been watching my program, The Interview on the Wire. During that period, I've interviewed doctors, politicians, businessmen, scientists, authors, and even the occasional Nobel laureate. For me, it's been exciting. I hope it's been enjoyable for you. But these, as you know, are tough times, and if this program is going to remain bold, independent, and sometimes even defiant, then I think we need your support. At the end of the day, it's a truism, but editorial independence is best defended by the viewers. So if you would like this program to remain the way it is, forthright, outspoken, and interesting, then would you consider supporting us? All you have to do is to click on the description at the bottom. But more than anything else, I hope you will continue to watch The Interview. Your viewership means an awful lot to me.